We are here, PU Talk number 5, and we're doing this remote, so bear with us as we kind of try through some different things to find the proper and right way of doing this. But John, coming from your house, talk to us.
Yeah, doing it. I wish I could say that I was in some sort of paradise beach-wise or maybe some mountainous, luxurious remote location, but I am remote from El Casa, Mi Casa, back in Cotswold.
Well, maybe one day we can do this from the beach or the retreat. The retreat, why not from the retreat that we have at going on at Performance Unlimited. For those of you who haven't heard, we are working to plan a retreat as part of our continued mission of building out the co-op. So, John, any feedback on your end on what we should know about that?
Yeah, we're looking at a date kind of at the beginning of December 1st off and try to avoid all the holiday hubbub, but also we're kind of working out the final destination, whether it's going to be a mountain home, a beach home of one of the clients or a neutral location that we rent, maybe even thinking about Asheville. So we'll bounce around some ideas there, but basically we're looking to put into practice in person in an isolated environment just what we've been talking about with every single one of these PU talks, the 7 pillars in practice, taking a day and a half, a couple of days in isolation as a group and really work on these things together.
Yeah, I think it'd be a incredible opportunity for us to get together and, like you just said, just talk about the things that we've literally been talking about on this podcast. That who knows how many people have been listening, but at least an opportunity for us to learn together, which, as we know through the community aspect, is super and super important in what we're trying to do. But going along with all that, let's dive into what we want to talk about today as we get into our next pillar. So we've talked about how you move, we've talked about how you eat. We're getting into pillar number 3, which again, I feel like I say this each and every week of, well, we can't forget this because it's super important. They're all important, and that's why they are our 7 pillars. But how you sleep comes in at pillar number 3 for us. And we're going to dive in that today, but give us a quick little background about where this came about, why this came about, what are some of your initial thoughts? When you hear sleep, what's the first 1 to 2 things that come to mind or top of mind for you?
Yeah, so I've always been a good sleeper. That's something I've never really struggled with, meaning that I value, I put importantly the aspect of sleep and how much I get and the quality of my sleep. My wife always gets mad at me because I can fall asleep very quickly and I'm sound when I sleep. I don't wake up much at night and I wake up pretty easily. So I've intuitively known that sleep has been important for me and my daily performance. However, one of the biggest complaints I think that we see and what I've found over the course of my career as well is this complaint of sleep, whether from a couple of different perspectives. 1, I don't get enough of sleep, or 2, I can't fall asleep. And everyone kind of has this understanding just from a subjective feel of how it affects them on a daily routine, whether you're a competing athlete on a professional level or you're a competing professional in the whatever industry or realm of life that you have. We know that energy is a big part of that, and within this context of how it shapes our lives, it really, we can think about it in a very general black and white terms as everything that we do and all the stresses that we put ourselves under each day can be very good for us, but the only way that they're going to be good for us is if our body restores and regenerates itself. And the only time that we do that is during, or the vast majority of time that we do that is during our sleep cycles.
Yeah, it's funny, I feel like in my experience and even with myself at times is sleep, just like we talked about last week with nutrition, is always the first thing to go, right? Like, I have so much stuff to get done. Well, maybe I just won't sleep tonight. And I feel like it starts at like such a young age as well, as like, think of like kids cramming in college and in high school even. It's like sleep is always the first thing to go. And yeah. I think we see it all the time with high school athletes, along with our adult clients, is that it's like the things that matter most to our ability to function are the things we often prioritize the least. And I think that leads into this idea that, like, what is actually happening? Why is sleep important in your eyes? Like, why should we care so much about it? We just said it's an important priority. It's pillar number 3, but why should I care about it? Because I can function just fine, John, on 5 hours of sleep. I've had nights where I don't even sleep, and I'm fine. Why should I care about it?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think we've all said that at some point in our lives, and we have a gist of what we should, quote unquote, really have as far as the amount of sleep that we need, the amount of hours we need every night. But there's a couple of realistic facts that maybe are not really conducive to that statement, and I want to pull out a pretty famous experiment research project that was done at the University of Pennsylvania in conjunction with Washington State, where they took 4 groups of students. We're always trying to poke and prod students in whatever way we can from a research standpoint, which I guess for a little bit of cash, college students will do anything, right? But they took 4 groups. The first group was held awake for 3 days straight. Second group only was able to get 4 hours of sleep per night. Third group, 6 hours. Fourth group, 8 hours of sleep per night. And they held these parameters pretty strictly in the protocol. And they did this outside of the group that they held awake for 3 days straight. That was just their entire protocol there. But the other 3 groups, limiting their sleep time, they worked through for 4 straight weeks with that sleep protocol. And in fact, they actually cut, the plan was doing it for 4 weeks, but they actually cut the research studies short because of what they were finding and the detriments and the performance deficits that these kids were actually having. So let me give you a couple of bullet points which can put in context why sleep is important for us. And then we can talk about some details into what is sleep and what is it doing to us. So first bullet point from this research study, and I can put this research study in some of the show notes or however we want to do it within Facebook or whatnot. But after week 1, 25% of the 6-hour group, so just a couple of hours short of what the optimal, we know as the optimal time frame to get sleep is, they were 25% of that group was falling asleep at random times throughout the day, only after a week. After 2 weeks, that same group had performance deficits that were the same as if they had stayed up for the 3 days straight that the previous group actually did.
Wait, hold on. Let me stop you there, John, because I mean, so what you're telling me is if I get 6 hours of sleep for 2 straight weeks, it's as if I just have not slept for 3 straight days.
Absolutely. Wow. And that is assuming, we can put it a better way. That's assuming that you're getting a 2-hour deficit of what your body, your individual body needs in order to perform the next day, in order to move through sleep cycles appropriately. And there's a lot of detail to that. But let's just say, for instance, the recommended, and a lot of research is really finding this to be true, that the average American adult needs roughly 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep per night. So let's just assume that 8 hours is really what these kids needed, and they probably needed more. But a 2-hour deficit is what we're talking about when we say 6 hours of sleep per night.
So what happens, and not to, because I want to continue to get your thoughts on this study, but just to clarify another point, what happens if I go to bed at 10 o'clock, I wake up at 6 o'clock, but I'm not actually sleeping for that whole 8-hour window? Let's imagine I'm up and waking up throughout the night, up for different periods of time. Would that be considered an 8-hour sleep, or would that be considered a 6-hour sleep?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in this protocol, literally, they were just tracking the moment that they walked into bed, like tucked themselves in, and the moment that they got up. So they were considering the time it took to sleep and the time it took to rise as in their completed 8 hours, which is very powerful to think about, because I hear a lot of people complain about, I'm not getting enough deep sleep. I want a sleep tracker, and it's telling me this and that, light sleep in there. And when we can get in the physiology of the different stages of, slow wave sleep or deep sleep, versus some of the other ones. But in reality, the important piece, and you talk about this a lot in the last few instances of this podcast, where intentions and awareness are really the most important piece. Your intention to sleep 8 hours is the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So now going back to that study a little bit, they talked about 6 hours, 2 weeks of 6 hours amount of sleep was basically or essentially like as if you had not slept for 3 straight days. What else can you tell us based on some of that data and research, John?
Well, the other piece that I pulled out that I thought was interesting that goes along in your first comment was that the majority of the participants didn't really notice their own performance declines. So when they were taking their tests, cognitive or otherwise, or coordinated physical tests, they actually had them grade themselves. And when the participants were grading themselves, they believed that their performance declined for just a few days, or their performance really only declined for a few days, and then it tapered off. So their belief was, yeah, that initial decline or deficit of sleep is affecting me, but now I'm used to it, and I'm really actually doing quite well. But in reality, they were continuing to get worse every single day. They didn't stop their decline, and that's actually why they stopped the entire research project. So we are, in summary, we are poor judges of our own performance decreases, even when we're in the midst of them.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we get so caught up in what needs to get done. We get so caught up in sometimes the minute that I have to be awake. This has to get completed. I have so much stuff to do that, like we've talked about in the last couple, is we don't prioritize the things that truly make the biggest difference with how we feel, how we move, and how we go about from a health and wellness standpoint. But, even for myself, my own experience, I mean, I can totally relate, right? You get a couple hours, a couple hours short, a couple straight nights. And like you said, you're almost like, well, I've done this. I've gotten by this way. I can get by again. And I think it's ironic to me that, again, sleep is oftentimes the first thing that we put to the side and say, you know what, I don't need that because I have functioned before on 4 hours. I can function again on 4 hours, and I will continue to function on 4 hours. But what we forget and don't oftentimes have the awareness to understand is, yeah, you can function on 4 hours with 3 to 4 cups of coffee, right? And that goes and dives into a whole nother rabbit hole about, like, well, what are we doing to stay awake during the day, right? What if we didn't have some of these things that we use on a daily basis to keep us going?
Yeah, and we're really talking about something termed sleep debt. For every hour that we don't get in our body's sweet spot, per se, that we need to fully recover, regenerate our cells and the body from every physiological aspect and really be our best for the next day, energy-wise and otherwise, we're talking about sleep debt. So in a wide range of studies, there's context of saying that, it's costing businesses over $100 billion a year from a lost efficiency and performance, or 95% of adults need 7 to 9 hours, yet 20% of adults get less than 6 hours. I would pose it as two questions back when people would give that excuse of, I've been functioning with 5 hours of sleep, and I'm going to continue to do that, and I'm successful. I would pose two very important questions. The first one being, at what cost? What is going on in your body that you don't know about physiologically? Because there's a heck of a lot of things going on when you do sleep, and when you're not allowing those processes to take place. Okay, how's your body compromising? And we all know from the training world what happens when we compromise movement too much, right? So when we compromise physiological responses, man, I mean, you don't even want. There is no physical therapist for those types of issues. The second thing is that you really are not, again, like we just stated above, you're really not even noticing your own performance declines. You've really started to deny the fact that you can be better, that you may be better, or that there is a better level in your performance, that you're ultimately just starting to be lazy.
Well, I can't help but think of Jim Davis, who most people know, and his HRV, and it's always interesting to especially now, because he has such a great awareness of what he's doing from a lifestyle standpoint and how that's affecting his HRV reading. So for those of you that don't know, HRV, from a very simplistic standpoint, basically gives Jim a daily reading of where he is on a readiness scale, from a red being, hey, I wouldn't push it hard today, and orange being, be careful about what you do, green being like, hey, you're free to train how you want to train. And it's always interesting to hear him come in and he'll say, hey, I'm in the red today, or I'm in the orange today. And he always, especially now, I've noticed the last couple of times, he's always able to pinpoint it back to, like, had a pretty lousy night of sleep the last 2 nights. Things have been crazy at work or whatever it may be in a situation, but he has the awareness and the ability to usually pinpoint it, and sleep oftentimes plays a role. Whether that's, hey, not that I didn't go to bed earlier, but I was doing this and I was stressed, and then that affected how I ultimately slept. It always seems that sleep plays a role in how he's feeling and what his reading often gets on that end.
Awareness, and let me push it to the opposite end of the spectrum, and Jim is a great example of that, of how sleep can be the value add or the value multiplier. So we all know that there's two real different stages of sleep. We know there's deep sleep and REM sleep, but to pull another research study out there, which I think, really quantifies things for us, but Stanford, the ever great Stanford, actually took their men's basketball team, and I'll have to look up actually when they did this. I don't know how long ago they did this, but they took their entire men's basketball team and made them sleep for 10 hours. So instead of giving them a sleep deficit, they actually gave themselves a sleep surplus. As opposed to, they found the majority of them were sleeping a consistent 8 hours. So they gave them a 2-hour surplus on average for 5 straight weeks. And you want to guess at what the performance results were at the end of the day?
Well, I would, top of mind, part of me thinks, well, okay, clearly 10 hours, there would be improvement, but part of me thinks there might even be almost a diminishing returns.
Yeah, so the players actually increased their free throw percentage by 9% during at the end of the extended sleep stage. So 9% in a free throw percentage is pretty hefty, right? We'll take that to another realm, and if you were to increase your 3-point percentage by 9%, we'd say that's a performance enhancer, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that happened. Okay, not only did those two parameters actually increase, but they also improved their 80-meter sprint time by 0.6 seconds, by almost a full second. Wow. In 5 weeks. So if we were doing a training program, for a kid that came in and wanted to get faster, and we were able to improve their 80-meter sprint time by 0.6 seconds in 5 weeks, that player and parent is more likely to probably continue on with us, right?
All done by sleep, yeah.
All done by a sleep surplus.
Well, so let's kind of, take that and let's talk for a second, because I think this is such an important point. How does sleep play a role in building lean muscle, of losing weight, of creating specific body composition changes that many people want to make within the gym?
Perfect. So I'll try to keep this as on the surface again as possible, and then we'll dive deeper in maybe later episodes or later context through blogs or something like that. But so we talked about two different types of sleep. We talked about deep sleep and REM sleep. Okay, let's give a quick bullet point of each of those. Okay, deep sleep, which we have to have. Typically, the body is going to be that's fully relaxed. It's most relaxed in that stage. The breathing becomes regular. The blood pressure falls. The brain becomes less responsive to external stimuli, meaning we're in this kind of non-responsive state. The type when you nudge somebody and they're still asleep. But also, this is really the renewal and repair portion of what you're talking about. So we lift in the gym. But it's not until we get into these deep sleep cycles that our pituitary begins to release things like growth hormone. We stimulate tissue growth and muscle repair. Our immune system even is repaired during this stage. People like Roger Federer and LeBron James are even being rumored as sleeping 11 or 12 hours a night for this very reason. The more total sleep you get, the more deep sleep you get, the more growth you get, the more repair you get, the better immune system you get.
So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying, John, is the more I sleep or going through the proper amount of sleep, basically I'm kind of kickstarting the process from hormonally into what is needed to allow me to make certain body composition changes that I want to through my training. And I think we had a slight malfunction through the Wi-Fi, so we will all nervously and anxiously await John's response to my question as we reconnect. Technology, people. Another stress that may affect how you're sleeping. But anyways, while it's just me now, you will have a conversation with myself as John is the